Are these Chinese military police gathering near Hong Kong? A new poll says more Americans see China as a threat. And the Communist Party declares war on Buddhist statues. That and more on this week's China Uncensored. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This week's China News headlines. What you're looking at is a satellite photo of China's Shenzhen-based sports center, filled with what appears to be more than 100 armored military vehicles. That sports center is only 10 miles from the border with Hong Kong. Some people fear the Chinese military is preparing for an attack to quell the protests that have erupted in the city for the past 2 months. I, however, am just amazed those alleged armored trucks are keeping off the grass. On Thursday, reporters witnessed China's paramilitary police force, the People's Armed Police, doing drills in the stadium and shot footage of police and their vehicles outside. According to my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, the military police were massing in Shenzhen in advance of apparent large-scale exercises. Oh, I get it. That's why they're at the stadium. It really was for large-scale exercises. Clearly nothing to do with Hong Kong, even though one of the exercises involved some police wearing black t-shirts similar to those worn by protesters in Hong Kong, while another group of police practiced charging at them with riot shields. So does this mean that Chinese military police are minutes from marching into Hong Kong? Is it time to panic? Not so fast. The Chinese Communist Party is keenly aware that the optics of sending in the People's Armed Police to crush a peaceful democracy movement in Hong Kong is not a good look, especially during the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. But the party also wants Hong Kongers to worry that they could send in the military police. So it's time to stop protesting because the Communist Party wouldn't want anything bad to happen in Hong Kong that they might be forced to do. U.S. officials have suggested removing Hong Kong's special trade status if China intervenes in the protests, which once again shows who's really to blame for the Hong Kong protests: the United States. Yes, official state media pin the blame for protests on the black hand of foreign interference, namely from the United States, which really hurt President Trump's feelings. China's foreign ministry also accused Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell of inciting chaos in Hong Kong, which is ridiculous. Those two people could never work together on anything. Other Chinese media published a photo of a U.S. diplomat speaking with protesters under the headline, "Foreign Forces Intervene." Those reports have gone from irresponsible to dangerous, according to the U.S. State Department. They accused the Chinese government of leaking personal information about that U.S. diplomat in Hong Kong, including the names of her children. But the disinformation doesn't stop at blaming everything on the U.S. and endangering children. No, they're way more sophisticated than that. After one young protester lost her eye to a police beanbag, CCTV posted this photo alleging it was the same girl, that she wasn't actually injured, and that she's being paid off. Of course, that's not the same girl, but I guess CCTV has a hard time telling Chinese people apart. Of course, you can't be sure of the intentions of all of the protesters, especially after Hong Kong Free Press released this video. Why are protesters beating and arresting other protesters? It's because they were actually Hong Kong policemen. They've now admitted to disguising themselves as protesters to go undercover. Of course, this is in no way part of Beijing's disinformation campaign to incite conflict and make protesters seem violent. That's ridiculous.
I can say that during the time when our police officers were disguised, firstly, they would not provoke anything.
People have seen them yesterday provoking.
We won't ask them to stir up trouble, and we won't ask them to conduct illegal acts.
So you see, any rumors you may have heard about communist spies dressing up as protesters to start trouble are completely ridiculous. Why would they need to do that when they have the Hong Kong police to do it for them? But stories like that may be putting protesters on edge, which could be why protesters surrounded 3 different men during a protest on Tuesday and accused them of being undercover police. 2 of them had to be taken away by ambulance after being roughed up by the crowd. Even though this man claimed he was a tourist, protesters say he was acting suspiciously. Turns out, he's a reporter for the Global Times, and now a hero in the mainland. Must be why the editor-in-chief of the Global Times said Hong Kong protesters should be shot on the spot. Obviously not the protesters who are your undercover agents, the other ones. That incident happened at a recent 5-day protest inside the Hong Kong airport. The first 3 days were peaceful. The fourth day, the Hong Kong government canceled all flights, thousands of them, leading to tensions between protesters and travelers. On the fifth day, the government sent in police to break it up. Flights have since resumed, so it's time to visit Hong Kong. It's the Pearl of the Orient. And it seems like Hong Kong police are getting at least some of their strategies from major Hollywood blockbusters. This is police firing tear gas in a subway at very close range. That's horrible. Now it probably smells almost as bad as the New York subway. And China has rejected a U.S. Navy request to dock ships in Hong Kong later this month and in September. Finally, the Communist Party is doing something to protect peace in the region. Meanwhile, in a show of support for Hong Kong, Taiwan is offering Hong Kongers who come to Taiwan humanitarian aid. Which it's shocking to think of Hong Kong as a place where people now flee from to get humanitarian aid. And of course, in response to the offer, the Chinese Communist Party told Taiwan to remove its black hands from Hong Kong. But I wouldn't want you to think the only China news this week comes from Hong Kong. According to U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, the U.S. may consider sanctions on Chinese tech companies involved in the persecution of Uyghur Muslims. Regarding possible sanctions on high-tech Chinese companies involved in the oppression of Uyghurs, Brownback said they are never off the table and always a possibility. So we may soon be seeing the headline, Trump administration sanctions China for persecuting Muslims. We are living in the strangest timeline. Meanwhile, Coach and Versace have hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. The Chinese internet exploded in rage at the discovery of t-shirts suggesting Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan were separate from China. They really should take a lesson from Hermes. Let's just say they know how to navigate Chinese sensibilities with this one-of-a-kind and extremely patriotic Birkin bag. And at the low, low price of only $124,000. It's such a steal. That's not a joke. Birkin bags can go for up to $300,000. Maybe the fact that this bag is so cheap hurts the feelings of the Chinese people. You better be careful about playing video games, because that's the latest target of one of China's most prolific hacker groups. According to this report by cybersecurity firm FireEye, the group known as Advanced Persistent Threat 41, or APT-41, injected malicious code into legitimate files that were later distributed as video game updates. The reason this is significant is because it means a state-level operator normally engaged in espionage activities has taken to financial crimes. It's always good to diversify. But it's not just the video game industry APT-41 is targeting. They're hitting other industries like healthcare, media, pharmaceuticals, education, as well as high-tech sectors. I just hope they don't hit the small team making videos about China on YouTube sector. And it's not really too surprising that this new poll by the Pew Research Center shows Americans' view of China is becoming increasingly negative. 60% of Americans have an unfavorable opinion of China, up from 47% in 2018 and at the highest level since Pew Research Center began asking the question. China is also tied with Russia as the perceived greatest threat to America. Greatest threat? Apparently most Americans haven't yet heard of pumpkin spice spam. And finally, the Chinese Communist Party seems to have it out for Buddha. Buddhist statues across the country are being demolished according to Bitter Winter, a magazine on religious and human rights in China. Some are being dismantled, others demolished. Of course, the Communist Party is surely doing this to protect the Chinese people from Buddhist extremists who might terrorize China, such as by blowing things up across the country. And that's it for this week's China News Headlines. And now it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored with $1 or more per episode by contributing through the crowdfunding website Patreon. LT Straven asks, do we know any other nations in the world who have shown any manner of support for Hong Kong and have done so clearly/visibly? I'd say so far the US and Taiwan have probably shown the most support for the Hong Kong protesters. As I mentioned, Taiwan is offering aid to Hong Kongers who come to the island, and there's been mass demonstrations in Taiwan showing solidarity with Hong Kong protesters. Many high-ranking U.S. politicians in the Trump administration and Senate have also voiced their support. However, as of yet, there's been no concrete action taken. I mean, other than being the black hand secretly behind the entire protest movement. Sadly, though, the UK government has been kind of quiet about the whole thing, which is disappointing since the UK has certain moral, if not legal, obligations to its former colony. The UK made an agreement with the Chinese Communist Party called the Sino-British Joint Declaration. It set up the one country, two systems model and was supposed to guarantee Hong Kong's freedom and independence. 2 years ago, China made it clear they didn't consider that deal to have any meaning. And the British, being British, apologized and quietly walked away. Thanks for your question. And if you have a question for me you want to hear answered on the show, sign up to join the China Uncensored 50-cent army by supporting the show with $1 or more per episode. Again, YouTube is demonetizing us so much we would have to shut down the show if it weren't for your support. And to everyone, thanks for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time.